too much use to you. It's pretty sparse, right? And so we do that on purpose, one, so that you'll hopefully listen to me and be able to engage a little bit more, and to fill out that note sheet that Natasha put in. So before we get started, I want to thank Greg for being here and talking in the second half of this. Thank you to Natasha for organizing it, and thank him for hosting it for this space, and then thanks to all of you guys for being here. This is a really fun part of my job to come out and do this. I'm realizing I didn't put my name on the front, but you guys already saw who I am. So I'm Justin Yates with Industrial Engineering at Francis Marion University. Yes, Francis Marion University has a 4-year industrial engineering bachelor's degree, and it's here in the PD region of South Carolina. So I'm happy to be here as a representative of Francis Marion. What I want to do, and I don't know, it's clunky, so I'll just walk back and forth. I'm going to apologize first and foremost if there's formatting issues. One of the other reasons I keep my PowerPoints kind of sparse is because I actually switched to the open source LibreOffice. So I don't have to, deal with Microsoft and some of the challenges, and unfortunately that brings up some compatibility issues when we're trying to go back to Microsoft and Windows-based products. So there should be some bullet points and other things, but you won't lose much. All right, but that's why it looks like that if it's kind of funky. I'm going to go backwards. I'm not going to talk about myself first. What I'm going to do is I want to talk a little bit about industrial engineering. I've been kind of told to keep this, a little bit loose and hit a lot of different talking points in the 30 minutes or so that I have. So I want to talk a little bit about industrial engineering. I'll find out what you guys know and try and fill in some of the gaps if there are any. Then I'm going to talk about 3D printing. I'm going to apologize that the whole time Natasha was talking, she was a really good sport, but we had the printer in the background. This is like white noise to me now, so I don't even hear it. I hope it wasn't a distraction to anybody. But we have a printer running up in the front. These are the printers that we use for some of the stuff that we do with outreach and summer camps and other things at Francis Marion. In the breaks or during dinner, please come up and look at it. Feel free to touch any of the stuff on the table. There's other things on the table that you can pull that's FMU related. But everything's there to play around with and touch, so please go ahead and do that. And so we're going to talk about 3D printing a little bit, because not everybody has necessarily seen or embraced 3D printing. And so I want to make sure, again, that the gaps there are filled. And then what I'll do is I'll talk about myself, and I'll talk a little bit about what I've done in K through 12 to try and talk about how we bring industrial engineering and 3D printing into the K through 12 space and some of my personal experience doing that, and hopefully end this talk with how both myself personally and how Francis Marion as a program, industrial engineering program, can be a resource to you guys moving forward. That's ultimately what we want and why we're here today. So that's the way that we'll run the talk. Notoriously, I take too long on these things, so you can kind of, if we're covering something you already know, tell me to speed up or give me the eyes or the face. If something sounds good, you can smile. It's okay. And so the first thing I want, does anybody know? Industrial engineering, right? Not engineering in general, but do we know what industrial engineering is, aside from that little quote up on the board? Does anybody here know somebody who is an industrial engineer? Greg does. Good. That makes me encouraged, right? And one of the other things that Natasha said I'll point out too is throughout this talk, I'm going to be talking about industrial engineering for a little bit. But Natasha mentioned interdisciplinary work, right? And everything that we do, and everything that I see, and all the skills that I see our students needing and acquiring over these years that they're in school, it's all centered around being interdisciplinary and having a good grounding in a lot of different areas, and at least knowing what you don't know, right? We're trying to get to the point where if you don't know something, you can kind of actively go out and pursue it. So we're talking about IE, but we do kind of broaden out even more. So no IEs, all right. Then what we'll do, first thing, all right, I'm attributing this, and I guess this is recorded, so I need to make all my caveats for my quotes, right? I'm attributing this to the Institute of Industrial Engineers. Lord knows where this came from, or who came up with it first, but when I was in graduate school, there was a bumper sticker stuck on the wall of the little rec room that we had as graduate students, and the bumper sticker read, "Engineers make things, industrial engineers make things better." And I always thought that was a neat little summary for what industrial engineers do. And I liked it for a couple of reasons. I liked it for one, because it's showing industrial engineers aren't the ones that are necessarily doing the manufacturing. We're not running the lathes. We're not actually doing the 3D printing all of the time. We're not the ones that are down in the weeds and in the trenches doing the grunt work, but we're the ones that are examining how that's done. We're the ones that are looking for the process and trying to streamline the process of thing I like in here, things, right? Not manufacturing systems. Right? Industrial engineering, it's tough. We have an image crisis with industrial engineering because it says industrial in the title, and everybody thinks that means you're building something, like you're building a car, or we're building a tool, or we're doing bearings, right? And we're working with industry, right? And it's not. Industrial engineering can be healthcare systems. I might even have that slide up here that leads in. I'll skip around, right? Industrial engineering, did I put it on here? I didn't put it on there. Well, sort of, right? Industrial engineering can be healthcare systems, right? It can be the thing or the system can be the body, right? The human body. The thing or the system can be the manufacturing line, right? The thing or the body can be a sports team. This is one of the things, sports analytics has become a really big deal. It started with Moneyball and what they were doing on the analytics side. If anybody saw the Brad Pitt movie, right? Sort of similar to that, but obviously movies take liberties. Read about it a little more. But Moneyball, right, in sports. Chip Kelly, who's now with the 49ers, but was with the Philadelphia Eagles for a while. Chip Kelly was doing crazy things with sports analytics. He was surveying players every time they came off the practice field. And they would do qualitative and quantitative surveys on the players when they were coming on and off the field. How are you feeling today? Did you feel like that workout was really strenuous, moderately strenuous, not strenuous enough? And they would get information from the players in verbal form, in subjective form, and then also, and I don't know if Chip is doing this, but with soccer, they're putting GPS units on players to track how they move during practices, so that they can try and correlate all of this information with winning. And can we identify a winning strategy? Can we make the process of playing the game more efficient and get the outcome that we desire? And that's what industrial engineers do at the end of the day. In healthcare systems, it's how do we get the medicine to the right people in the right place at the right time and in the right dose? Right? And this is the other thing that really students sometimes don't even understand, and we'll get on that soapbox a little bit later. Students feel like there's one right answer and it comes from the back of a textbook or an equation. And if they run the equation and they get a solution, that's the right solution. Right? And the problem is if you don't have that critical thinking component behind it, and you don't have your training and also just your gut, right, and your questioning and your natural curiosity, right? In a manufacturing system, the wheels fall off the car, right? Or it doesn't get off the assembly line and pass the quality control check, right? In a healthcare system, it dies. And you're seeing more and more in healthcare, industrial engineering coming into that area. It's become a really big buzzword in the last probably 4 or 5 years. Healthcare analytics, right? But the reason is because there's a lot of inefficiency in that system and there's a lot of risk inherent in that system. And what IEs do is we try and make things better. So what we're doing in that healthcare system is trying to make that better. One of the other things I will talk about as we go, so the caveat here was industrial engineering, it's systems-based, right? So it's not, just like if you're a mechanical engineer and I'm looking at how I build the car, I'm looking at aerospace and I'm looking at the aerodynamics of my airplane, right? It's not just that one thing. It's not how the air flows over the wing, right? Industrial engineering is about the whole process, the whole system. It includes all of those little pieces and components, right? How the air flows over the wing and how the aerospace engineers work that out. Industrial engineering also includes how we're going to put the thing together and in what order and how do we get the parts and how does our global supply chain work and how do we connect with those people to bring those parts in-house, right? And be able to organize the logistics. What if there's a snowstorm? Are we set up to handle that or are we going to have to shut down the plant? Right? Industrial engineers have a hand in all of these different areas of business and industry and systems. And to me, that's the really cool thing, right? And that's the thing that I say we have an image crisis, one, because of industrial in the title, and two, because we do so much and we're so broad. It's hard to really say that this is the one thing that we do well, right? Because we do a lot of stuff and our whole emphasis is on doing everything, right? And trying to look at how we build that efficiency into those systems. So it's tough, right? And it's hard when you're trying to talk with students. And this is one of those things that you really have to kind of key in when you're talking with students. What interests them? If it's a healthcare application, if it's the sports thing, if it's manufacturing, is it something like 3D printing, right? Is it something like design, right? But you've got to kind of cue in with them and try and figure out and really do something that's slightly more personal when you're talking to them about IE. And that's what challenges us and makes it hard sometimes to discuss what IE is. So I'm hoping that I'm giving you a little bit better picture of the broadness of IE and hopefully of the attractiveness, right? One of the other things that's a benefit to industrial engineering, and we see this a lot with students that come to our open houses, and if any of you guys are educating 11th and 12th graders that might be interested in this, there's one more open house that Francis Marion has this year. We do a few every semester. April 9th is the next one, and the last one for the semester. But I have some flyers on the table. Feel free to take it. I've got a ton of them. So if we use the ones up on the table, I've got more. Right? And if you've got 11th or 12th graders that you think might want to come out to Francis Marion and come visit us, send them our way, take a flyer, and have them sign up or have them email me. But, that's one of the things that we get when we talk to students, and questions are, well, I want to be a civil engineer, I want to be a mechanical, and you guys don't do that, right? And one of the other cool things about IE is because it's so ubiquitous within engineering, it's a really nice foundation for building that fundamental engineering concept, right? This idea on the right-hand side is the engineering design process. I don't care what type of engineer you are, right? This design process is pervasive throughout engineering. Right? And the key is it's iterative. Right? So we're constantly reassessing and reevaluating and analyzing. Right? We're constantly reworking and discussing and communicating. Right? And it's an iterative process. Right? And so a lot of times what I'll tell students, if you're interested in civil, but you don't want to go to Clemson or you want to stay in the P, come and do a 4-year degree with us. Right? Let us teach you industrial engineering, and through industrial engineering, we can hit those threads and those markers that these students are interested in. We've got 2 huge healthcare systems here. I'm hammering on healthcare because that's something that right now is pretty hot, right? But we've got 2 huge healthcare systems here, Carolinas and McLeod, right? And we've got individuals and connections at both of those, right? And we're working with industry around here to get data and use it in courses, right? So we have manufacturing companies, but we also have some service industries that we're working with, right? So other things, another example of where IE can be is Walt Disney, right? We're a lot closer here than I was about 8 or 9 months ago. I'll tell you that in the background, right? But Disney World, right? When you think about the experience of going to Disney World and waiting in line, right? And how do they know how long that line needs to be? And how do they know how to try and make that experience of you waiting in a line more enjoyable for you, right? That's making a system more efficient, right? That's making a thing better, right? And that's industrial engineering. So I tell students, come to us, tell me and communicate to me what you want to do. Do you want to be a bioengineer? Do you want to be civil? Do you want to be mechanical? Do you want to be technical? We'll give you the 4-year IE degree, and then I will make those connections, and we will work with you guys to put you in that landing spot where you want to be down the road. And a lot of times in IE, if you want to do a 4-year degree in IE and then go do a 2-year degree or a 1.5 years and get a master's degree somewhere else, that's an easy transition. Right? It's not necessarily the case when you're going and jumping through some other disciplines in engineering that are a little bit more specialized. Right? But because IE is so broad, it's a really neat base for you to start with. So when you're going back and talking to students, let them know. Right? So talk to them about IEs and tell them what it is. So I talked about the scheduling and whatnot. I think I had a couple of videos here that might play, just to give you an idea of what a system looks like that IE might play in. This is a TED Talk, and if you can see it on the video, it's Mick Mounts, right? So this is not me, and this is not my system, right? But one of the things that you're seeing, again, is these systems can be very simple, right? Like or somewhat simple, like a line at Disney World, but they can be incredibly complex. And what you'll see here is you're seeing this is a big warehouse, right? But there's not people moving these pallets, those little orange carts at the bottom. Those little orange carts are automated, right? That automation and that process of automation is an amazing thing that IEs have a handle in, right? We've got to coordinate not only the supply and demand of the warehouse, right, and where all these things come into play and where we store them and how we put them in the warehouse, but also how to go and get them. And we're not doing it with a human, we're doing it with a machine. So we have to tell those machines how to go out and route under that uncertain demand. We have to make them go out and route so they don't hit each other and run into each other. Or if they do, to be able to have a way to check that and communicate that and stop the system so that you don't get those crazy pileups, right? And you'll see this system, there's a ton of moving parts in this system, and most of them are automated and they're all working beautifully, right? We build those systems as IEs. We build them through math and we build them through simulation. We build them through statistics. Those are some of the key factors and key fundamentals that go into IE. So it's neat to me, this is a picture of a simulation model that they built, right? So it's taking that real world and modeling it in the computer using math and statistics is all this is. A little bit of computer programming, a little bit of math, a little bit of statistics, and you get a simulation like this. And this is a big tool for us. Building these simulations, you do a lot of what-if analysis, a lot of sensitivity analysis. There's a lot of uncertainty here, and if something changes in the system, I can break the computer system without having to actually break the real world to see what happens. So that's a little bit about IE. And again, it's really tough here in limited time to try and get everything across. I'm going to try and talk and not be embarrassed with being able to not make this thing big again. And I did it. All right, so the next thing, and I don't even know how much time I have left. What am I doing? Natasha? We're all right? All right, what is 3D printing? So we told you about IE. And I talk fast because I get excited and there's a lot of stuff in here. I think we'll have time for questions, or at dinner, ask questions, all right? Well, what is 3D printing, right? So 3D printing, we have an example of it over here. Right? So 3D printing is an additive process, right? It's a manufacturing process. If you haven't seen it before, you've got to walk up and look at these machines, right? This is a desktop machine that does plastics, right? In terms of wow factor in 3D printing, it's down at the bottom, and it's still really cool, right? This thing is awesome to watch. The idea that I came in and started this at 4:45 or 4:50, and there was nothing on this plate. And in about 20 or 25 more minutes, right? So before Greg gets up and talks, we'll have a finished product on this table, right? It's a really neat way of approaching manufacturing that leads to customization, right? And this idea of the economy of one instead of the economy of many. So it's with 3D printing, right? I don't have to build 200,000 parts in order to be cost effective. I can build 1 or 2 or 3 and have that be economically viable. That's why you're seeing, if you Google, I even forget the term that you would Google for this. I would just 3D, print something in 3D, right? You pick a generic phrase or generic sentence, right? There's companies out there now, Amazon will do this, where you send it a file and Amazon will 3D print it for you and send it back to you, right? So there's viability in people using 3D printing to build these businesses that are really highly specialized and focus on very customized parts, right? It's the process of joining materials together from a 3D model. Right? There are all different processes. One of the cool things with 3D printing, and that my wife, and I can never say names, right? My wife had a friend, and this was awesome. I use this every time I talk. My wife had a friend that she was telling the friend that I was doing 3D printing stuff. And the friend stopped her and said, yeah, there's just things in life that I don't get, like time travel and 3D printing. one of them's possible, right? And one of them is not, right? I know we just found gravitational waves and all that, so we can prove that they exist, right? Time travel and 3D printing, they're not in the same sphere, right? The Venn diagram for those does not overlap, okay? But it's a dialogue or an observation on the bigger picture that people are intimidated by this technology a little bit, and they're largely ignorant of it, right? And ignorance is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means you don't know, right? So people don't know much about 3D printing, and so they can be a little standoffish or a little uncertain about it. Once you start playing with it, it's an amazingly simple process. Like that machine there, all it is a big hot glue gun. That's all it is. It's just a mechanized hot glue gun, right? And it's a really cool one because I can take the ideas in my head and I can turn them into something tangible. And when I start talking about the K through 12 applications, oh my gosh, do you have students, right? You grab them, right? That's your hook. And when I was trying to think of stuff to do in K through 12, right, we needed that hook. And it just so happened that it was right about the time that we were doing 3D printing, or that 3D printing was coming up, that this idea was coming together. And it just, man, for students, it's an unbelievable way to engage with them. I've already talked about this a little bit, maybe not as much, but you have two choices for manufacturing. The traditional economy of many, where I build a mold, right, and then I fill that mold with a whole bunch of plastic or liquid, it cools off, and I wind up with a product at the end of it. And I got to produce 200,000 or 500,000 or a million parts in order for that to be viable, because there's a lot of upfront costs. Right? Making the mold, building the system, right? Making the line, right? The manufacturing line to be able to do this. And it's very wasteful, right? Traditional manufacturing is top down. If I want to make something like any of those objects on the table with traditional manufacturing, I start with a block of wood and I whittle it, right? And what I do at the end is I wind up with this beautiful piece, but I wind up with a bunch of garbage at my feet. And I can't do much with that except burn it, right? There's really not a great way to sit and pull all of those individual pieces back together and make another really strong raw material. So there's a lot of loss in that system, right? Additive is the opposite. And there's the formatting, right? So this should say additive manufacturing, right? And it's bottom up. And that's where we say it's really cool, because I don't start with the block of the wood and subtract. What I do is I start with nothing, right? And I build the material on top of it. And that's a game changer, not for everything in manufacturing, right? Additive manufacturing and 3D printing doesn't solve all the world's problems, but it solves some of them, and it makes some of them a lot easier to do. Right? And what it does for education is it gets kids engaged and interested. Right? So that's a cool thing. The one thing, this is along with my time travel comment, right? 3D printing is actually not that new. Right? The concepts of 3D printing, all that machine is doing, like we said, it's a glorified hot glue gun. It just puts little layers on top of each other, right? The way it does is that there's plastic that goes through a hot end, just like you push a stick of glue through the hot end of a glue gun. And on the other side, that glue comes out kind of sticky and tacky, right? That machine does the same thing, it just does it with plastic. And what we do is, we just take that plastic and we lay it down in very, very small layers. But when you do very, very small layers for an hour, or 2 hours, or 5 hours, or 10 hours, you get a really cool product at the end, and you get something in 3D, right? So that idea has been around for a very long time. It started actually in the 1860s when people were doing photo sculpture, right? The concept, right? Not 3D printing like this wasn't in the 1860s. That would be time travel, right? But 1860s, conceptually, there's markers of 3D printing and additive manufacturing that were there. And you see, they started very, somewhat early on. And then they continued in, and it started picking up kind of in the 50s and 60s. And that's when you started seeing this boom, right? And the reason you see that boom, and I didn't put the whole timeline up here. I actually have a timeline over on the side if you want to come and look at it. It's a cool colored timeline and shows a lot of that history. But the reason it started to pick up is because technology's finally caught up with those concepts, right? I can get those stepper motors and the circuit boards and all the other things to build that printer, and I can get that relatively cheaply now, right? Relatively cheaply meaning, if I Google Barnes & Noble, Home Depot, Lowe's, right? $300, $400 for a 3D printer, right? Now you can get a desktop printer, it's like buying a car. I can get a Kia, I can get a Chevy, I can get a Lexus, I can get a Bentley, right? There's all different ranges. But $300 to $400 puts you in the 3D printing world and gives you that capability in your house at some of these places, right? And it works exactly like that. That technology has become accessible. The other thing that happened in 3D printing is, we said, taking a computer model and turning it into something that can be printed, right? So it relies on computer design, computer-aided design, right? Some of those files used to be really big. Storage space used to be really, really small, right? Floppy disks and the like. Okay? Now we can go to Best Buy and get a 2 terabyte hard drive, 2 terabytes, right? For like $100. I can store anything I want on that. I mean, unless I'm just like pirating every movie that was ever made, I can store anything I want on a 2 terabyte hard drive, right? So that's no longer a limit, right? File size and composition and detail and coarseness, right? That's no longer an issue, right? With computer-aided design, or at least not as much of an issue. Right? So it's not only storage, right? You have to worry about RAM and the processing power of the computer and whatnot. But it's become a lot more advanced, right? To the point that you get these really cool things, like this website called Tinkercad, which is awesome, right? This is computer-aided design. It's computer-aided design for the K through 12 space. It's drop and drag, right? You have 2 choices with a product, right? I can make a product a solid object, or I can make it a whole, right? And if I can do this, try and do it in real time, if I group these 2 objects together, I made the cylinder a whole. You see if it works. And you see, right, 2 objects down on the table, and now I've got a box with a cylinder-shaped hole inside of it, right? That's it. Right? Any of the things that I can draw on paper, I can turn it into shapes, right? The trick is just how many, right? How hard or how easy it is just how many shapes is it, and how small are those shapes, and how much precision do I need to build them, right? But I can do that with this. Right? I can start by using those shapes and using that concept and teaching kids. This Tinkercad, and I don't represent Tinkercad, I don't represent any of the companies that I've been talking about, right? I just get excited by the fact that it's out there. We use Tinkercad because it's free, right? It's owned by Autodesk. So it's under that Autodesk umbrella, right? But it's a free software. Right? Now, it might not always be free, right? Autodesk might see this and go, wow, a lot of people are using Tinkercad, we should start charging for it, and we can't control that. But right now it's free, right? It's browser-based, which means you don't have to install a thing on computers. If you're an educator, you don't have to go and install something. You don't have to go necessarily through the IT department to ask them to download something on 20 computers in your cart, right? You just go and you get on Mozilla. I didn't download anything, I just logged in. It's browser-based. The other cool thing about browser-based is I can work on it in the classroom, and then if I go home, I can continue that same design at home. Or I can go to the public library. If I don't have Wi-Fi at home, I go to the public library, right? Or I can go to an aunt or an uncle's house, or grandma or grandpa, or a friend, right? And all I need to do is get on your browser of choice, Chrome, Mozilla, Firefox, Safari, whatever, right? Internet Explorer, and I just type in my username and my password, or my email and my password, and all the designs I've been working with pop up. Right? There's another cool thing, because now students in their engagement aren't limited by being in the classroom. If they're really engaged and really excited about this, they can continue to work, and they don't need those resources necessarily. As long as they've got something somewhat comparable, right? Meaning a computer and an internet connection, they can do this. That's wild, right? So that's where we say technology is kind of caught up with some of the fundamental ideas of 3D printing that have been around for a while. There are other materials that I can talk about later. There's my Tinkercad. So the way that you do 3D printing is I either design it myself, or I can take it from somewhere else. There's a couple wrenches on here in that picture down in the bottom right corner. That's from NASA. Right? NASA has that file on their website. They've got a whole bunch of other files on there. That's a working socket wrench. I've got one that actually works. If you want to actually click it, or if you got a ratchet set out in your car, go get it and bring it in. And we'll find, my colleague did it, we'll find the one that fits on it, and we'll give a bolt a turn, and we can do that. So that's from NASA. So I can go out and I can grab stuff from other people. Natasha was saying she had her husband and they had access to a 3D printer through work and came home with a snowman one day. Right? Awesome. Right? We've got an octopus up here that I love, right? It doesn't have to always be functional. It can be fun, right? But I don't have to always design it. Right? The other thing I can do is I can scan it. And I put, maybe, because scanning is still, the technology's there, but you got to pay a lot of money for a really good scanner, right? You can get cheap scanners, but they're going to give you a cheap product, and not a very consistent one, right? So the idea with scanning, again, the concept is there, but the technology hasn't caught up. And by scanning, I mean like I can take a scanner and do my face, and then print a figurine with, a Justin Yates face on it, right? We could do that. Just not very reliably right now. Nor would we probably want to for that example, but for other ones, might be fun, right? So who am I in the last few minutes? All right, so I was born in Rochester, New York. Why am I interested in this stuff? Interdisciplinary, right? And also the fact that I probably was like a lot of your students, right? I didn't come into this world knowing engineering and saying that's what I want to do with my life, right? My undergrad was in business. Because literally I had to go to school. I knew that I wasn't done at the end of high school, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I literally told my parents, I said, everybody needs a manager, so I'll do business administration. And that's what I did for undergrad. And it was during that business administration program that I took a course called Management Science, which is very similar to operations research in the industrial engineering world. And that lit the fire under me. Right? But it took me 2.5 years of undergrad in order to find that course. Okay? So one of the reasons that I get really personally excited to talk with you guys is because I'm hoping that I can maybe shorten that lead time for some people. Right? That was a hard transition. From business into engineering is not fun. You don't take math classes in business. All right? Accounting is about as hard as it gets. Right? You don't take computer programming in business classes. Right? You don't take very much statistics. You need those things in engineering. But one of the things that I liked about my degree, and I wouldn't change my path for anything, I got a lot of the intangibles that I see are lacking in students that want to be engineers today. Right? In business, you have to communicate. And you better communicate effectively or you won't be around very long. Right? You have to be creative and curious as a business person. You've got to, at least in the object or the project that you're working on, you've got to be curious and creative or you're done. Right? There's very few jobs, even something like accounting that's very numbers-based. My father was an accountant. Man, you've got to see those connections, right? And you've got to retain a lot of information, be able to call it back, and you've got to be able to connect those dots for people and look circumstantially, right? And identify the right path and the right plan of attack for those people. There's a lot of different ways to file a tax return, right? Regardless of what TurboTax will tell you, right? And there's very different outcomes depending on how you file it. So you have to be creative. So there's a couple of things there that just, in an engineering world, kind of don't translate. So what I did was, to get back on story, right? So I grew up in Rochester, New York. I went to Baldwin Wallace for undergrad. It was Baldwin Wallace College, now it's Baldwin Wallace University. That change was made after I was gone. Then I went to graduate school, and you see more interdisciplinary. Industrial engineering, but also geographic information science, so GI science. And that was because that's what paid the bills, right? I got to be, National Science Foundation had a program called IGERT. I got to be an IGERT fellow. And that whole program, that IGERT program, was predicated on interdisciplinary study, right? And again, what a cool connection, right? Engineering and geography. Most people wouldn't see that. At Francis Marion, I worked with fine arts people. One of the first things I did at Francis Marion was we went over and I said, who are the people in fine arts that want to do stuff? Right? It was that, right? That 3D printing, perfect for fine arts. Right? And fine arts, right? You saw the engineering design process, very iterative engineering design process. So is fine arts. We just use different words, right? We have different bubbles and different terms that we use, but it's the same iterative process, right? That same creative process. So my background, very interdisciplinary. And then before I came to Francis Marion, I just started here in the fall. Before I came to Francis Marion, I worked at Texas A&M University. And I was looking at that to make sure the dates were right. I do remember that I worked there for 8 years or 7 years. But I was on faculty in industrial and systems engineering at Texas A&M. And we found this opportunity, my wife and we talked about it, and I told my wife, I said, if I do not take this opportunity, I will check the website of Francis Marion University every 3 to 6 months for the rest of my life to see how their program is doing. I said, that's the sign to me that we need to come here and be a part of this. Right? So I want to be here. And one of the other things to take away from this, if I don't have enough time to tell you about all the great things you can do in K through 12, I want to talk to you offline about it. And we want to find, some of you we know or have talked beforehand, I know a couple of phases, and we've had those conversations. But I want to talk to you guys about this. So, I've already talked about this slide, so I don't have to do too much on it, right? These are my observations on, and my passion, where my passion comes from. Part of it is the interdisciplinary, part of it is the business and being ignorant of engineering. Part of it is my observations on the intangibles, right, and what students need, right? Those communications, note-taking, man, stopping and thinking. And I saw a couple, right? Stopping and thinking before you just start jamming numbers into an equation. Right? You got to hold on for a second and trying to teach kids that stuff. Okay? I'm here to try and be a vessel to help get that into K through 12, some way, shape, or form, so that we can try and help those kids beat the learning curve, and not just if they're coming to industrial engineering, but wherever they go. Like, these are skills that are everywhere now. You need them, right? Note-taking, right? That back of the book syndrome, right? There is one right answer. No, never, right? Almost never. Almost never one right answer. Right? And almost never one approach to get there. But we don't get that, right? We think, engineering, I'm building a bridge, there's only one way to build a bridge, and here it is. Right? Totally false. Right? But that psyche is ingrained in our students, and then when they come to college, and we try and throw stuff at them that doesn't fit that mold, wow. Right? And that's another reason that we're doing this, right? There's a lot of me trying to give back, and then there's a little bit of self-preservation that says, if we can do this a little bit more and engage and try and get a little bit of a different message out there to students through things like 3D printing, then maybe we can permeate, and when they get to us and come to Francis Marion, maybe my job is slightly easier, right? Which would be awesome. Because then I can spend more time in the classroom instead of working with them on how to take notes. Right? So it's really neat, that's why I'm here, right? And also as a US educated student, right? I didn't love math. I tolerated it, right? But the other thing was, when I was in graduate school, I was a minority. Okay? I think for the 4 years that I was in graduate school, you could count on one hand the number of US-born students that were in my program with me, and I'm one of the 5 possible. Okay? So not only is that something that I'm saying I've done and I want other people to do, right? There's a huge need for US-born, right, or domestically educated. It doesn't have to be US-born, right, but domestically educated individuals to come in and fill these jobs. In industrial engineering, 25% of the workforce right now, and this is like 2012 or 2013 numbers, 25% of the workforce is 55 or older in industrial engineering. So a quarter of the working population is about ready to retire. And I'm not necessarily confident that we have enough people to come in and fill all of those gaps and those holes that are going to be created. Right? So there's that caveat. Right? And then also as a U.S. student or as a domestic student, there's a lot of opportunity for funding at the graduate level that people maybe aren't aware of. And that's another thing I can help with. I'm not going to talk about that. Oh man, that got messed up. But there's a lot of opportunity for that. So to kind of wrap up, because so far we've talked about nothing. Right? We've talked about industrial engineering, we've talked about 3D printing. Okay? Those are topics. How does it relate to you guys? Some of you maybe already knew some of this stuff. Some of you maybe I was able to get you to laugh or think for a second. Right? But how is it relevant to you and how should it resonate in the classroom? Because hopefully most of you here are in the classroom and want to be able to take something back. So I want to finish by talking about a couple different things that I have done in K through 12 and hopefully let that springboard into conversations that we can have after the talk today, right? So, my personal thoughts are, I'm fine with coming in and doing 11th and 12th grade classes and talking to students. I love doing that stuff. Email me if you want us to come into a class, right? But let's call it what it is. And in 11th and 12th grade, that's recruitment, not outreach, is my personal opinion, right? So 11th and 12th grade, if they haven't done the prereqs to lead into an engineering program, they can't turn the ship in a year or a year and a half. They can't do it. Right? So if we get them excited, there's very little that we can do other than tell them, hey, you're going to have to go and get a whole bunch of this stuff that you might not want to get. Right? But if we can target them in like late elementary and middle school, right? Early middle school, oh my gosh, right? Not only is the door wide open for them, right? You're also getting them before STEM and science and engineering becomes uncool. And there's statistics. So I worked with a guy at Texas A&M who's actually a trained engineering educator. Right? His degree was from Purdue, Johannes Strobel. Right? Degree was from Purdue in engineering education. Such a cool guy. Such a fascinating way of looking at this world of bridging education and engineering. And he had some statistics that he would throw out when we would talk to people about this stuff. Right? And one of them was the fact when you ask, just think about it because it resonates with anything, not just engineering, right? But just in general, the creativity in this process, right? If you ask students when they're in kindergarten, like, who's an artist, right? And man, almost everybody's hand goes up, right? Every kid. I got a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old at home, right? And we got a little chalkboard wall that we just put up. Man, those kids, if we put that chalk out on the floor, they're back and forth and coloring, and right? There's lines and colors on the board. And one of them, my 3-year-old swears is a house, right? Man, I don't see that yet, right? I'm sorry. My eyes are still adjusting to parenthood, apparently. But man, to him, he's an artist, right? And you ask those kids in kindergarten, who's an artist? And everybody's hand goes up. And then you ask them again in 5th grade or 6th grade, right? And you've lost about 25% of them, right? Or actually probably more like 33%. I think we lose a third, right? In that span from K through 5. And then ask them again in 8th and 9th grade. And you've lost another third. So you started with this really nice pool of students that were just engaged and creative and problem solvers and critical thinkers. And by the time they get into high school, you've lost 2/3 of that group. Right? And so one of the cool things that we try and do is use hooks like 3D printing to get into the classroom and get these kids excited so that when somebody comes and says, you're a dork for doing, or whatever they call each other these days, right? For doing engineering or for liking math, right? They can point to the cool stuff that they're making and go, oh, no, man, look, like, this will keep them in, right? And ideally, we can help keep them engaged. The other thing we want to do is just get students, not everybody should and not everybody wants to be an engineer. And that's okay. Not everybody should be an industrial engineer, right? Part of my job is to make connections with people, right? And that's what I want to do. If you want to be a civil engineer and you want to go to school for civil engineering, I tell the kids at the open house, give me your email and I'll put you in contact with someone at Texas A&M or University of Buffalo or anywhere else that I have connections where they have a civil engineering program, right? We're supposed to be matchmakers as well with this, right? But I want students, right, if they don't want to do engineering or industrial engineering, we want them to have an active reason, right? It's like the Brussels sprout syndrome, right? Do you like Brussels sprouts? And kids will go, no, I don't like them. Well, have you ever tried them? No. But how do you know you don't like them? I just know, right? And there's usually something in your lives that we all have that same thing, right? I don't like spiders, right? Do I have any idea why I don't like spiders? No. No clue. Completely irrational fear, right? I know I don't like them, right? Not that this is the perfect analogy, because I'm not going to eat them, right? But Brussels sprouts, right? You got to taste the thing. You got to try it once or twice, right? You've got to give it an opportunity, and then if you don't like it, be able to say, "Well, I don't like the taste." Right? It was the texture was off for me, and I didn't like it. Right? It was too tangy, or it was too bitter, right? Or it wasn't. It was too crunchy. Right? Have a reason. Right? So we want kids when they don't want to do engineering. That's the difference between active and passive logic and reason. That's another thing that came from Dr. Strobel. Right? Was we want kids to be exposed at a young age so that when they deviate from that path, they're doing it confidently and intelligently. And not just because somebody told them it was uncool, or because they just think they don't like it. All right, so how do we do this in like 3 minutes? Where we talk about what we did in K through 12. And I should have pulled that website up, but I can do it later. All right, so one of the things I did at Texas A&M, don't get excited because it's not here yet, but hopefully next year. All right, I started a 2-week summer camp at Texas A&M called Raised 3D. What that was aimed at middle school students, and specifically at middle school students that did not have engineers as role models, right? I didn't want the students whose parents taught at Texas A&M, right? That's not the students that we want to engage and we want to reach. They already know that they can be engineers, and they're already active, right, in terms of that interest or disinterest. Well, we want the students that don't know, but still have that creative spark, right? And they're there in middle school. We worked with a couple school districts to draw students in. We'd get 6th and 7th graders to come in for 2 weeks. Right? We would take a van and pull them around. We'd feed them lunch. We'd keep them there for about 6 or 7 hours a day. Right? Parents loved it because it was a 2-week thing. We tried to make it free, or as free as possible for kids. That's the one thing I need. If anybody has connections to somebody with pockets, it takes money to run some of this stuff, but we can do it. It's not that much, right? But this idea was that we immerse them in this technology for 2 weeks. And I will tell you, right, if you are intimidated by this technology, a 6th grader is not even a little bit, right? They come in within about 2 hours, they're designing their own name tag and team logo and printing it, right? By the end of the first day of class, they want to know whether it's done so they can take it home yet. And the speed of the printer is actually the thing that holds them up more than anything else. It's amazing to see, right? With stuff like Tinkercad. So what we did, and I have a slide on that, the other thing I did was I consulted with a company, I'll tell you that in a minute. Right? So there are a couple key principles with this Raised 3D thing. One was that everything was project-based, everything was team-based. Right? It stressed intangibles, like communication, right? Both internal communication, and then also back to the whole group, right? So you're working in teams of 3, 4, 5 students, but then when you're reporting, there might be 25, I think the last year we had 30 students in this thing, or 35 students, right? So we've got a good number, 7, 8 different teams floating around. You're communicating back to the whole team and pitching your idea back to the team, right? That idea of constantly communicating and getting feedback is huge for these students. Get them comfortable now talking in front of a group. We stress communication and report outs, the iterative process. The other thing we did was we mapped, okay? Now, in Texas we had TEPs. South Carolina we have our own standards. I put them up there, but I didn't hear any audible gasps when they came up, and I'm sure they were somewhere inside of it, right? Common Core and Next Gen, but they're up there, right? The idea is that you're not just doing a project to do a project, but you're mapping to something. So here's one of the examples, just to wet your whistle in the last 2 minutes, all right? So we pulled that little windmill generator, right? $5 or $6 online. We bought like 1 or 2 of them. We don't need 20 for a classroom. What we did was we targeted, this is the equivalent South Carolina standard. The TEP was very similar, right? So the Texas one. But physical science, energy transfer and conservation, right? So what we did was we targeted 6th and 7th graders. The school district we were working with said, hey, we've got a problem with this, right? We are not testing well with energy conservation. So let's come up with a project that tests that and helps us talk about it. So what we did was we looked at a dam. We said, dams generate energy through turbines, right? That little windmill generator, right? The little windmill spins and it lights an LED. Well, what we said was, that's kind of cool, but wouldn't it be even cooler if we rip, for $6, you can cannibalize these things, right? Rip the fan blades off of it and have the students design their own fan blades for it, right? And again, at that age, they're creative. I got stuff that look like spoons. I got stuff that looked like more traditional turbines, like the one that's printing down there. And I got stuff that looked like it was from another planet, right? I mean, it was crazy, right? But you get all these different ideas and concepts, and it's a way, again, with that group communication, let's talk about them all. What do we like? What do we not like? Which one do we think will work well? Which one don't? Hypothesis testing, right? Then what you do is you go through and you design, you prototype it, right? They build it in cardboard. And then after they build it in cardboard, they go back and they design it on the computer. right? And then they redesign, and they reiterate, and they talk to each other, and then at the end they print the thing, right? Printing it is not the first step. Printing it is like the 5th or 6th, right? That's like the 5th or 6th iteration by the time you print, that you've gone through this thing to try and validate it and verify it and make sure it works. And then what we did was we actually plugged it onto the generator, and we walked over to a fountain that was on the A&M campus, and we tried to see if that light would light up for the kids, right? And it was pretty cool. It was a pretty neat thing. And it also showed integration onto an existing system, right? If you didn't have precision in your measurements, that fan blade didn't fit. It was either too big or too small, right? If it doesn't fit, it's not going to light the light. You don't win. So then, and you can also learn from that failure is another big thing with engineering. Why were you that far off? Well, the machine didn't do it right. It's the first thing, right? The machine didn't have the tolerance. They don't use tolerance, but the machine messed it up, right? And 9 times out of 10, that's not true. Those machines aren't precise, like totally precise. They're millimeter precise, right? So you can talk to them. Well, why else, right? Let's say that that's not it. Why else can we talk about failure and how you failed, right? And learn from that. And what can we do better if we wanted to design it? So that was the one. The other thing we did was with this company called Hand to Mind. I put on the other slide, even though I didn't talk about it. There's no conflict of interest. I don't work for them. We contract for a short period of time to do some consulting, and I'm not selling their product. Everything I lifted was online, so you guys can all go out and get it. But what we did was there's companies out there, right, and there's other ways in these tools, right, this way of engaging through manipulatives, which is what we're trying to do with this raised 3D stuff as well, right? Get the kids something hands-on. Don't make it just cerebral, right? You've got to connect with them. You've got to get them active, get them up, get them moving, get them doing something. So you have Hand to Mind. What they did with us was they said, hey, we want to bring engineering into some of these hands-on modules. Things like that iterative design. Things like statistics. How do we bring statistics into a second grade classroom? Right? How do we start to do something like that? Or just data collection. And the concept of hypothesis testing, they don't have to do a p-value, right? They don't have to pull up Minitab and run some type of regression, right? But we can start introducing some of these concepts at a very young age. This was K through 5 that these modules were centered on. They were always team-based, right? And they enabled that iterative evaluation. So this was an example of one, and this is my last slide, right? But again, it was also modeled to a standard, right? I think these were next-gen standards, but it was modeled to a standard, right? So make observations to provide evidence that energy can be transferred from place to place by sound, light, heat, and electric current, right? This is, I think, 4th grade. And the kids built a little solar house, right? And this solar house, what it does, there's a bunch of different materials I can put inside it, I can put outside it, I can slightly reconfigure the thing. There's a lamp that shines on it to create the heat. There's a thermometer inside it that reads the temperature. I can change the distance of the heat. There's multiple variables that I can control. You can start talking about multivariable testing, all right? And then it's not good to test everything all at once or move everything all at once, because then I don't know which thing caused the problem or which thing resulted in the better solution, right? So that idea of taking some simple concept like this, putting it into a classroom, putting some numbers on it, putting that communication and that team-based effort behind it, right? And how do I work effectively on that team? So all of those different concepts came into that hand-to-mind engagement as well. And that's something I put up there, again, not so that you go by the module, but so that you know, right, this is something that we've done, myself and my colleague, right? This is something that I'm willing to do. If you have something in class that you're doing and you go, man, I would like to add a little engineering into that, email me. And we'll come on and brainstorm. We'll come up with a project. We'll come up with an extension. We'll find a way to make it work, right? We'll find a way to do some of this at whatever grade level you're doing. And I know I don't think we're 5th grade or K through 5 here necessarily, but we've all got friends and we know people, right? So let me know what I can do to help you guys, right? And the last thing I think I did mention as well, we go out and we talk in classes and other things. If you want us to come out and try and do a demo, I think we're going to Darlington High School next week. We just did Carver Elementary for a STEM night. My colleague was just at Southside earlier this week. Let us know. We'll bring a couple printers out. We'll talk to a class or we'll talk to them about IE. These were a couple other events. This one was Carver up in the upper left, Palmetto Middle School on the right-hand side. And we did a science night there too. So my email, jyates@fmarion.edu. If you don't remember that, just Google FMU Industrial Engineering or FMU Engineering. We're the only one right now. So you can't miss it, right? And I've got cards up in the front. Come and grab whatever you guys want, and then we'll be around for dinner and breaks and all those things. I talked really fast. Appreciate you staying with me. I'll have no voice tomorrow, but tonight was fun. So, thank you guys, all right?